everyone. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm the senior aide to Commissioner Wilson.
Happy Friday.
Happy
Happy Friday, Lee.
Friday!
Happy Friday,
Welcome.
Ernest.
Welcome. For those of you who are joining us, please drop your questions, comments, any concerns in the chat so that we can answer them towards the end. And let's just go ahead and get started. Commissioner, how's your week been
Yeah.
so far?
It's been busy, and the weeks that we have that have a BCC meeting always feel really dense. There's a lot to get through. That Tuesday is always really crunched, but it was really good. There was a lot of work done, and it looks outside like things are starting to get green again. And
Springtime.
yeah, I know the pollen is dusting us a little bit, so I have had kind of itchy eyes. I don't know about you. I get a little bit of the allergies this time of year, but
Do you have anything fun on the weekend planned?
oh my goodness, catching up on laundry and
Fun.
you know, I know washing the dogs. Yes, very glamorous stuff, but it's usually catch up time, spending time with the family. Um, it's today is actually a day that I think one of my kids may hear from some school, a school that she applied for. Made me start thinking about the fact that we're rolling around to spring break in the next few weeks and what would have been prom season, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with that for people, and hopefully there'll be graduations, and it's just all that, like all the nervousness for this class of kids, and my heart is with you all. Just know we are still really, I feel like, optimistic that things are getting better and better every day. One of the things we heard this week at the BCC was that we have now vaccinated, I think, 47% of our 65 and up residents in Orange County, which that's not where you want to end, but it's certainly enough of a percentage that we're seeing the overall rate go down, the hospitalizations are going down. So that does feel like a huge relief, and hopefully what that means is that some of those normal ceremonial things that are supposed to be coming in the next few months, that maybe we can try to figure out how to make them happen. I'm not a school board member, but I know you all that know me know that I try to really stay engaged and in touch, and hopefully be an advocate for safely making sure that some of those really cherished things can happen.
Well, I, definitely have been hearing that on a federal level, COVID, vaccinations and the COVID task force is working really diligently. How is that impacting here locally?
So we will be getting a FEMA, which is a federally funded, federally operated vaccination site, which is very, very exciting, because I think the key really is that there should be as many different avenues of vaccinating as possible. And up until now, it has largely been either the hospital systems, which they've done a tremendous job of getting our healthcare providers vaccinated. So it's either been the hospital systems or the county, which the county is then in partnership with the state and has to go by the state mandate, which has been a 65 and up, largely across the board, unless you were a healthcare provider. So hopefully that FEMA site will continue to get us to the point where we can really open up the next group. I know that I have in my family some younger, vulnerable folks that really, really need to be vaccinated, that I will sleep better at night if they are. I know that we all have people that we love that are essential workers. I know that our law enforcement officers haven't been one of the governor's priorities, which, I said this last week, I'm going to say it again. Call your governor. And you're in Florida, call your governor's office, email him and say, hey, so law enforcement have to respond to a scene without knowing what they're going to come to. They should be vaccinated. Why they weren't a priority from the outset is really frustrating to those of us who I think really know that they are out every day being exposed. And I think it's also really important to know that the way that we're operating our appointment system here in the county isn't going to change. So if you are waiting for that portal to open, stay the course. Make sure you set up your account through the OCFL website, the Orange County, Florida COVID website, and so that you have it already established. And we have to take, unfortunately, guidance of, or the direction of, the governor, which means that the 65 and up is still where we are we're applying. So, I haven't had mine. I know that you haven't had yours, and we're really trying to make sure that when those opportunities come up, that we're getting information out as quickly as possible. Once again, hopefully that FEMA site will ramp it up. I also believe that once the Johnson & Johnson vaccine gets its emergency approval, which appears to be,
I think today.
yeah, it appears to, if it hasn't already, and we've been busy and I haven't been able to look at breaking news, but and that's going to be a one shot vaccine. And the reason why that's important is because there's a certain percentage of the population that's never going to go back for their second one, even if we really try and make sure that it's set aside. Also, there's a refrigeration difference with that particular vaccine. So the percentage of people that will be vaccinated, can jump really pretty incrementally. We're going to start getting higher numbers, I think, as soon as that one is approved, and as soon as we are able to get some of those other avenues of inventory and vaccines rolled out. So
Yeah, I think that they're scaling up the distribution already with the Pfizer and Moderna already, but then this third,
yes,
Johnson and Johnson will help even more.
And ideally, in the coming months, it'll be like a flu vaccine where we'll be able to get it through a wide variety of places. Right now it's really an inventory issue. I know Orange County residents have been really good about reaching out to us regarding the procedure and policy here and how the operations work. And I know that logistically, one of the things that Orange County has been very serious about is not making any more appointments than they have vaccine, because they're very concerned about people being disappointed and rightfully put in a position where they're out trying to get this vaccine and the inventory is not there. So really our vaccine portal opens and closes based on the inventory and the amount of appointments that can match that inventory without putting anybody in a position to be at an appointment without the shot that they need.
Yeah.
So the other, I think, issue we wanted to make sure to remind people of, if we talked a little bit about it last week, it came up again on Tuesday, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Because we put acronyms to everything, you hear it in the building tossed around as the ERA, but it's the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is also part of the next wave of federal funding for assistance for renters. There's grave concern about what's going to happen if and when landlords have the opportunity to start the eviction process. One of the things I really want to be clear about, and anybody that's listening to this, if you can remind people that that are renters, even though right now there is a rental an eviction moratorium in place, it does not stop the opportunity for a landlord to start filing those actions. You have to be proactive in making sure that you have applied for the moratorium relief or for the basically hitting the pause button. But you will always, obviously owe what you owe in rent no matter what happens. It's getting put off to some extent. What makes this program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, really important is it's actually money to go towards that whatever you owe in arrears or whatever you owe that is now sitting out there waiting to be paid. And so, to qualify for this, you need very specifically to be past due in rent, at least a month past due in rent. Mm-hmm. There has to be voluntary participation, once again, based on the landlord and the tenant's willingness to participate in this, because there are some things that they want to know when these funds are applied, which is how it should work, to make sure that people who are getting it are legitimately in need of getting it. So you have to be behind in the rent. You have to be able to
get permission from your landlord.
Get permission from your landlord, which means, that voluntary, that permission from your landlord. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the big sort of difficulties in some of these applications for assistance right now have been the requirement to prove that COVID was the reason that you are behind in your rent. So just know that that's something that if you have any of the paperwork that came from your employer that caused you this sort of cascading effect that is now affecting your ability to pay rent, that's sufficient. You need to make sure you hold on to all that documentation, and that's how we can make sure to get you that help. The Testing is still going on through the county, so just know that in addition to getting the vaccination out and about, we are still really relying on contact tracing. And I do think it works when people get tested. If there's been an exposure, we sort of know, okay, time to hole up and be in one place for a little while until you get your results back. And that way, there's not the community spread amongst the people that are still vulnerable. There's going to be a percentage of people, even with the vaccine, that are still possibly subject to being vulnerable to the sickness in various degrees. For anyone that's gotten a flu shot and still gotten the flu, they do the best they can, but not everybody builds the same level of immunity. So that being said, if you are one of the folks that have already been through the procedure or through the vaccination process and you've had both, still wear your mask, still give people lots of space, because you could still be a carrier. You still actually might be able to get it and transmit it. So just to be on the safe side, and just know that the county is still trying to make sure that we are getting every opportunity we can, whether it's state or federal, to get out into our community. So there'll be more to come, I'm sure, in stimulus discussions. And so we are very, very in tune here. I feel like we're in a great position. The mayor is in constant dialogue with mayors from across the country and the federal government, and trying to make sure that there isn't a subset of a set behind. So you think about Florida, and are we competing with other counties? No. We really are pretty much communicating with all other municipalities across the country.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about Vision 2050 before we move on to some highlights of the week.
Yes. So, listen, the meeting Tuesday was long and exhausting, and if I didn't have to actually be part of it, I probably wouldn't have been able to pay attention to the whole thing. But one of the items on the agenda, and it was actually the very last one of the day, which was disappointing because it was earlier on the agenda if you look at the printed agenda, but they had to bump it into the later afternoon because there were some items that went a little longer, was really doing an overview for the commission of Vision 2050. Vision 2050 is the update to Orange County's comprehensive plan. And Lee, what is the Orange County comprehensive plan?
Well, actually, I want to say something before we even get into that. Every single email that comes into the district, I wish that I could explain to them Vision 2050 and the comprehensive plan. It's basically the guideline of how our planning department looks at how we're going to strategically plan out the future development of the county. However, it doesn't always seem like they're, thinking about the environment or water or what have you. And in your needs, you're out in the community. You're the eyes and ears of what should probably be on that plan.
It's critical, and I think it was very disappointing. One of the slides, and maybe what we'll do, if there's a way to do this, is to go through the same slideshow. We have the slides that were sent to us that were presented to the commission, and actually make those available to everybody. So you can see the history. They have part of it is historical, and they talk about the origins of a comprehensive plan. And, the second that Florida got air conditioning, the development started. We got some railroad inways, and then all of a sudden we got to the highway revolution, and now we're going gangbusters and putting up houses in every corner. And for a while, the state of Florida, at the top level, governor, legislature at the state, felt like it was important that local areas checked in to make sure we had something cohesive. Rick Scott, in his infinite wisdom, threw that out. So really it left all local areas to their own devices in order to move ahead with planning. Well, I think there's always tensions when it comes to planning and trying to balance what is of historic relevance, what is of environmental relevance, what is going to be more important in 20 years has to be considered, because when we decide to put a school here and a park here, that has to be strategic, and we have to say, okay, because that's going to serve the most people, and then we grow from there. That is not the way it happens usually. Usually the houses go, and then the school, and so what we're trying to do is to get really what we've heard in our phone calls, in our emails, in our Facebook posts, is the frustration you have with that planning. We're trying to get that in writing to the people who are going to be updating that code. And that Vision 2050, if you go to it, watch the slideshow, it is exactly what they showed us. We will plan to share it again, even through our channels, so you don't necessarily have to go retrieve it on your own. It is mind-boggling to me that the area in District 1 that they have highlighted as, and they color-coded it, it's lovely. It's all color-coded, and I'm being a little sarcastic because I was like, this makes no sense to me. As intended growth, if you listen to the meeting, my question was, who intended it?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Not
not
I, said the fly.
yeah, so because I'm not sure that the people that are living in the area, that was their intent. I'm not sure if it was any employer's intent, because we're still trying to really attract employers to the area so that people don't have to commute to downtown Orlando or to Lake County or get on I-4 and spend an hour a day. That's just not, it's not the ideal situation and planning. So when something in, District 1 is highlighted as intended growth, who intended that? Nobody answered. I think they thought I was being funny. I was a little bit being funny, but I still want to know who intended that. And if it was just so that we could sort of sell more homes and property, then that's one thing. We need to identify it and then decide what we're missing and how to get back to what we wanted to see there. Because I do think that the overall idea behind the new urbanism that was pitched at that time was a work here, play here, school here model, and they just allowed way too many veerings from that original plan. So what we get to do now is to try to really work hard in every opportunity to make sure that they update the plan to reflect what people really want, to update the plan to reflect what we will need as humans in the coming years. And if you watch the meeting, you hear me ask about why we're not talking about water when we talk about density of population, because those two things cannot be separated. And so I think I gave them something to think about. They gave me something to think about, but we need you. So I know I sound like a broken record with that, but it really, when they put up the numbers and it was something like 200 people had participated in a survey, I think there was a total of 700 in all the surveys. I'm like, we get like 200 calls here a week from people that are frustrated with the way that the road is planned in front of here or not there, or what is being built here or not there. That's what we're talking about. So now is the time, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, there's some town halls coming up, and we'll post about those as they're coming up in March into early April. There's some surveys on the Orange County website. Just literally Google Orange County, Florida Vision 2050 and it'll pop up. But I'll have to say, just from being a novice and seeing frustrations where I see development, house, or a new commercial building next to a bunch of empty, vacant, commercial buildings. In my mind, I'm thinking, who is intending the growth in the urban sprawl? And why is it that all of the people in my age group, I just turned 30, they're nowhere near being able to afford a house, let alone all the new houses that are being built on every corner here that are far outside of the price range that anybody here can afford.
Right, and then you hear that the issue with housing is inventory, and I'm like, well, there's an inventory. It's just out of the price point of many of the people that actually do work, live, school here.
Yeah, but then I hear it
that's
say,
that huge discrepancy between those two things, and I think it's a problem, because what happens is then someone like me who's asking the questions about, if we're talking about this type of density, we have to talk about water. If we're talking about, this price point, how are we going to house the people that are coming out of our own school here in our programs here? People, will be like, but you're a job killer for asking that. I'm like, no, wait, that doesn't make sense at all.
No.
Those things are not, that's not what I'm saying. I think that there has to be a link, a nexus between our population of people who need the housing and the housing that's needed. And I'm not just talking about I think people hear that and they're like, oh, she's talking about a housing project, or no, I'm talking about a variety, but a variety that will match our median incomes and
people that are already here
and that are in the area that those employers need them to be, because
Mm-hmm.
that is our other issue, is transportation. And if
Mm-hmm.
you put something 27 miles away from the larger um, work area,
Mm-hmm.
and then wonder why you're getting cut through traffic in your rural areas. I mean, I'm not a civil engineer,
Mm-hmm.
but it's clear to me that when they looked at that growth sector, is what they call it,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was no way to get from that growth sector to any of the major employers without cutting through a rural community, that they didn't really care about
Mm-hmm.
about that rural community. And so that's my frustration. And
Mm-hmm.
if you zoom in to me during that meeting, you will see me sitting there mumbling. They have us in a glass, like a plexiglass enclosure, so nobody got to
Yeah.
hear me, like just kind of mumbling about what could they have been thinking, putting that type of density. I don't have a problem with density in the right place. That's how we house people. People need places to live. But you put it somewhere that they can school, work, and then
Bike.
you add play area. Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
bike. Make sure that they're connected by trail. Make sure that they have a place to go play
Mm-hmm.
soccer and kick around.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yes, that's our vision 2050. I know there are a lot of people who, it's really our fault, I think, for not explaining it. And I mean our as in, people who are interested in this, in policy, and in what happens in our communities, not explaining that it, as a commissioner, you would think I'd be able to say something like, well, can we just switch that from an intended growth sector to something else, something that makes more sense based on the fact that we don't have enough space on our roads right now, and that we're still waiting for relief schools. And the answer to that is no. Even though it was a very democratic process that brought me to this seat, the democracy part of this is still in effect, in that there has to be a certain amount of public persuasion towards the people that really want to develop those parcels.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mention all this because there's going to be some stuff coming up soon where I'm going to be reaching out to very specific areas in District 1 to let you know about proposed development, that we are going to need your feedback and your engagement. And I will absolutely have your back on this and need to have your input in order to do that. So whenever I go to one of these meetings and try to express the frustration of constituents, it's not even close to being as powerful as actually having constituent participation. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that is something that I'm going to continue to ask for.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the last BCC. Like, how did it go? You had made mention that a lot happened.
Yeah, so we talked about the Vision 2050, which was at the end of the day. So we're kind of doing the upside down
Mm-hmm.
review.
Mm-hmm.
But the day started actually with a very touching tribute to some citizens, some very special citizens. And the first was, and I don't want to mess up her name, Flavian Pimenta Carvalho. I'm sure I'm totally, completely mispronouncing her name, and she's a lovely woman, a mom, a manager and server at a restaurant that saw a family come in that one of the children appeared to be in distress and possibly hiding parts of his face, that he may have had bruises and cuts and scrapes. And her senses, her gut instinct, as somebody that was there and watching the family order, was that something was going on. And she wrote on the back of a piece of paper, "Are you okay?" And she held it up where the family, the parents, couldn't see it, but the boy could. And I believe I may be crisscrossing some of the parts of this, but I want to make sure I'm clear about
Mm.
how astute she was. He kind of indicated everything was fine, but then he looked back down. The parents didn't allow him to order off the menu, and she asked, "Are you sure you're not hungry? Can I get you something?" And the boy didn't order anything and looked to his parents, and she once again noticed that there was something unusual in the communication and in his appearance, that he looked very guarded and that he looked like he maybe had bruising. So she didn't let it go there. She literally wrote down again, "Can I help you?" And she held it up behind the parents so that only he could see it, and he nodded his head. And look, I got chills talking about this, because she then called 911, and she probably saved his life. He had suffered some very, very serious injuries at the hands of his abusers, and was being controlled with food and with abuse. And she said to us, and it was the most profound thing I had heard in a very long time, they're all our children. They're all our children. Yeah.
We cry every episode.
Right, because I mean, it's the most fundamental idea, this idea that, if you see something going on and you're worried about embarrassing yourself or embarrassing someone else, that maybe you remember this story that, it's, if you're wrong, you're wrong, no harm, no foul, but if you're right, you could save somebody. And that's what she did. And her bravery to me was, that she was there when she called law enforcement. They came in and she likely saved the life of this boy and his sister. There was another sibling in the house. So, it was a reminder that even during these times, and this was after the restaurants opened again, so they did have a place for them to sit, but it was hard to even see the boy's mouth because he had a mask on. I guess he had glasses on, but she could tell there was something. And so her gut instinct as a mom and as a human with a big heart was to try to make sure he was okay. And she did the right thing. And it was a great moment for us to thank her, and for me to remind myself and to remind everybody else I know that if you see something and you have that gut feeling and it gives you that the spidey sense, the chill, that maybe it's because there's something going on. And that's okay to bring it up as an issue, either to ask that person if they're okay somehow safely, or to notify an authority of, your concern, and make sure that you're not letting it slip by. Because I can't imagine if she hadn't done that night, what could have happened. So it was really a special time for us to acknowledge her, and we were able to give her flowers and a thank you.
So brave.
Yeah, I would have loved to have hugged her. We're not there yet, but maybe someday I'll get to hug her. And then to T. Taylor, who is very well known and loved local news camera guy. During this last part of our African American History Month, he paved the way as a brilliant person in our local news. And so it was really great to have an opportunity. He wasn't there in person, but he piped in from his news van, where he's still doing work after all these years. And it was great to hear from people who had been inspired by him, that he led the way in his field. So that was another feel good for us as a commission, when sometimes we don't get a lot of those.
Well, thank you for sharing. And is there anything?
One more?
Yeah. Is there anything else that happened?
The other one is, and this was presented a little bit later, but you could see it if you looked at the meeting. All the beautiful artwork was commissioned through the county, and these fabulous artists. We have an opportunity to then meet somewhere that we have some incredible art, and there's some descriptions if you go to the website, the Orange County website, of the different pieces of art and how we commission them through our arts and culture division here. And so we had an opportunity to thank the artists and to hear about them a little bit. So that was another exciting portion of the agenda.
Yay. I love it when there's like feel good stories intertwined with the BCC, because I know it can be a lot of information.
It's a lot of information, and sometimes it just feels a very sometimes people's interactions with government aren't because there is something positive going on. It's because there's either an issue that needs to be changed in our law or our ordinances, or it's about trying to grapple something like this crazy pandemic, and how we're going to serve our public, or just the growth issues that feel like a weight on my shoulders every week. So yes, anytime that we can talk about art, and we can talk about good, kind people, and it's always a pleasure.
Well, there was a little victory that happened out in District 1 that I know a lot of constituents reached out about. Hempel?
Oh, yes. So I know that sometimes we get constituents that call about areas where they know or they feel like that there's safety issues, and sometimes these issues have gone on historically for a while, and they're really frustrated. And I continue to dialogue with us, because we can start the process for how to get that studied. There was a constituent group, several people, including some. I think they got some local, actually some news involved, because the problem solvers out there do those type of things. For Hempel Avenue there in Gotha, where I believe there had been, numerous safety issues. It's very residential, but it can also be used as a cut through. So once again, when I talk about the rural areas that are sometimes used as cut throughs, the speed limit will be coming down there. They did do the traffic study, and when it goes up to the BC, the traffic study's done. It did meet the approval based on the traffic study to be a benefit to bring that speed limit down to 35. It'll be going in front of the BCC, I believe, next meeting. So, and after that, the signs will probably just change. Hopefully, we've seen where they make the signs. We know that they can do that when they get the go ahead. So that hopefully will make that area safer. If you travel that way and somebody with a lead foot, warn them now, because sometimes that's it can be a little bit of a surprise when they they find themselves really far over the speed limit.
Yeah, so let's also talk a little bit about some boards that you're sitting on. Currently, you're in a water cooperative board, a community action board, and you're also participating in a children and family services board.
Yeah, I had the pleasure and the honor to be on the Children and Family Services Board before I was elected. And then as a citizen, I had to step off because then I was an elected person. And so they have one commissioner that sits on that particular board. And each board really has a different makeup depending on what the needs are of that board and what the governing, kind of the governing oversight is. So for this board, they have one commissioner, and then the rest is made up of citizens that are either interested or have some background in social services or education. We've had educators, we've got pastors, we've got just community leaders. So it is a really special makeup of a board, and there is turnover, and people term out of these boards. So I really want to encourage anybody out there who has any interest in putting their toe into some government. It doesn't take up a ton of your time, but what they work on is really important, because the Children and Family Services Board is a advisory board for some of our foster services, some of our emergency intake for juvenile, adolescents, families that are in crisis, the Great Oaks Village, which is really our own pretty amazing schooling and housing of children who are sometimes in transitional time in their life, coming out of a crisis. And so we have really I've been able to see in the last few years decisions that are made on that board that have real impact, and you can see it. We decide to do something, for a quality of life of a child, and then you can come back and actually see that in person. There's something so gratifying about it, because so much of, I think, advisory boards and committees can be really frustrating. It feels very bureaucratic, but this one is actually very functional, and the people that work there professionally are fantastic. So I would encourage anyone who has an interest to go on Orange County's website. Once again, go to where it says residents, go to where it says advisory boards, or even just put a search in for advisory boards, Orange County government. And there's just a general application. You can do the online application, or if you're somebody who would rather download it and fill it out and then email it or mail it back, you can do it either way. Some of those boards that have very specific ties to a district are oftentimes appointments for me, but some of them are actually, or actually a huge majority of them, are appointments by the commission at large. And MMRB, which is the Membership Mission and Review Board, oversees the makeup of those. So we actually have a board. It sounds very bureaucratic, but it's true.
Boards on boards.
But the reason why they do that is to make sure it's fair, and to make sure that there's not any particular district that may be more represented, or that there's any profession that's more represented, because you can see how, if there's a special interest out there, how dominating the population in decisions on those boards could really affect policy. So it's nice to see the checks and balances in play, but they always need more applications on file, which means that you can go in and fill out the application. Let's say this isn't the best time for you, it can sit there. And so this has happened a few times since we came into office, where it was somebody who really was interested in a particular board. There was not an opening. the applications on file, it gives us an opportunity to submit them as a nomination right when that opening happens. So, take a look if you are an expert in something, or you just think it's interesting, or you just want to see sort of how that dynamic works. It's a really great place to jump into government.
I'll say I was very impressed when we toured the Children and Family Services, like juvenile intake center. Um, it was so clean, and I could just tell that we're very fortunate to live in a country where we have these
It felt
types
like a
of
dorm, like a
services.
college. It was
Yeah.
actually nice in a lot of college dorms, as far as like the way that it felt warm. It felt there was. It didn't feel sterile. It didn't feel punitive. I was really worried about that because I hadn't been inside until then either, even though I'd been on that board. But it really
Yeah.
did have a very. It had a feel that I think you don't always associate with intervention and social services. And so that to me was, a great comfort, and it also kind of renewed my motivation to stay engaged and make sure that type of service stays like that and it just gets better. I love to also think about how many people we met that had been there. These women that really, I mean, are.
Oh, everybody there worked there for like 25 plus years. It was very family oriented. And I was just trying to say that, not every country has these types of services. And
Yeah.
I think about, how because we don't see it in our day to day, because we don't know about it, I know I catch myself like complaining as an American and being like, I want to see us here as an American. I want to see us, at a more progressive place. But there are some things that don't get talked about every day that I think we're very
Yeah.
fortunate to have, access to. And I definitely was impressed.
Gosh, and there's no lack of heart. I mean, I do think that for all the times that I'm frustrated with things on the news because you see the cruelty, and then you go somewhere like that where people who work in that place in that field, that's a calling. They're not there. They're not there because they're going to retire to a yacht. They're there because it's a calling, and because they feel compelled to make sure they're taken care of. Once again, like our special guest, they're all our children, and so I think to your point, it's and I know there's always that government intervention, government. Well, no, that these are people, right? So I understand that we are trying to make sure that as a society that we're providing social safety nets. But that only works if you get really great people and people's hearts are in it and they're there for the right reasons and they're given the right resources. So those things can't operate without each other. You can have the best heart on the planet and want to do all the right things, but without resources and making sure that we have, a good, beautiful building for them to be in that does provide a place for them to learn and feel safe. And if we don't have educational opportunities, that those things you can't separate them out and try to wing it as a, as a culture. So we have a long way to go for sure. I mean, there are gaps in that social safety net. There are gaps in our ability to care for our most vulnerable, and we just have to stay diligent and keep trying to find places that we can bridge those gaps and make sure that we're doing it better the next time, and make sure that we pay attention to those resources so that we're using them for the right people in the right ways.
100%. So let's go ahead and add some more acronyms. We definitely should talk a little bit about your briefing, your general briefing on CRAs, because this is fascinating to me, and I think the community has a lot more power than they think they do when it comes to decisions like this.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that a couple weeks ago I like banned the use of acronyms, but it's impossible because that's all we do around here is use acronyms. But CRA is that community redevelopment. So typically, historically, the state of Florida set up a mechanism by which tax dollars, revenue can be earmarked to go in and remedy some very specific issues in a geographical area for blight. I hate the word blight. I think it's another one of those words. I'm like, what does that mean? If you think about the probably the most common or recognizable uses of a CRA, it's when you see an older downtown that has been redeveloped, right? Downtown Winter Garden is really the prime example, at least in this area, for everybody to hold up as like the ideal CRA, because it's, but it used to revitalize an area that has since empowered small business, restaurants, some other business opportunities and economic drivers that then improved overall quality of the neighborhoods, the schools, everything sort of was on an upswing because that CRA investment. So really the CRA, the idea behind it, the legislative intent was to take an area that had been ignored. There was something wrong, there's been things that, for lack of a better way to describe it, gotten run down. And I think the way that we think about what malls, when malls were all the rage, and big malls were opening up somewhere in suburbia, and it was taking business away from the mom and pop downtown Main Street type of businesses. The CRA is offered an option to bring it back, and to bring back that, so it really hones in on, and if you look at downtown Winter Garden, they uncovered the brick pavers, and they're the beautiful facade of the clock tower area, and the pavilion where you can during non-COVID times go to listen to music, and that provided a great location for a farmer's market, and all these things, improving on the trail, so that there's that connectivity to the neighborhoods in the area. So there's a CRA that'll be I think they're looking to, there's two actually in Winter Garden, but I think one they're looking to extend so that they can finish some of the goals that were on the list from the previous CRA. There's going to be more dialogue about the CRA in the iDrive area. I know this is a very sensitive subject in some circles, but I want you all to know, no matter where you fall on it, that I am a definite independent thinker who will take all of the information I get before ever agreeing to anything. And I know I'm only one measly vote when it comes to those things, but I'll ask a lot of those questions in a very public forum to the interested parties to make sure that everybody knows where everybody else stands. Because I think ultimately the transparency of what a CRA is intended to be used for, who's pushing for it, what the end point is, because I think that's the other big issue for some of these is, well, if this was intended for specific blight for an area, why, if it's been going for this long and we've achieved check on these projects, why does it need to continue to go? Well, those are questions that are legitimate, right? If you're not telling me specifically how this is going to help this community, then it's not community redevelopment. We don't know what it is. It's just an earmarking. So those are all really important. I did have the opportunity to speak to some interested parties on both sides of this issue already, but that will continue. That dialogue will continue, and my goals are not going to change. And those goals include making sure that those economic drivers do stay healthy, and I mean that more than one way, but that includes making sure that all of their employees are in the best position they can be in, and that their employees have transportation options and safe, affordable housing, and making sure that if there's impacts to the environment from the development of that area, can we include that? So all of those things that go into deciding what redevelopment looks like can be on the table. There was a definite misinformation, misperception that a CRA had to be for transportation. I don't know how that came out. It can be included, but it really, if there is a blight in an area because of, really anything within that geographical area that can be addressed, including housing and transportation, then those things are appropriate uses of a CRA. The county commission has the ability to adjust and adapt those CRAs. Mm-hmm. So it's also not written in blood, which I also think you kind of get the feeling when you look at these historically, and some of the controversy that surrounds them, that they act like they're written in blood, and they're not. They can be modified, updated, and they can come to an end if necessary. They can be renewed.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said at a meeting earlier this week when somebody was talking about those economic drivers, XYZ, and you literally, because a lot of people try to talk about how the environmental part of what you're trying to do and impact fees and all of those things, that it kills jobs, it kills the economy. And you said it so perfectly. You said that people aren't going to want to start businesses here and work here if they don't have clean
Right.
environmental recreational things to do
Right.
around where they work.
That's exactly right. How do you attract high end, the best employers, right? Those
Mhm.
job
Mhm.
drivers, without providing them a place that they really want to live, which
Mhm.
includes, of course, places where they can go tubing on a Saturday or
Yeah.
ride their bike on a shady path.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I think to try to isolate our environmental concerns and my environmental work and the things that I prioritize, to try to isolate that and then call it somehow detrimental to economic drivers is really dangerous,
Mhm.
because I think what it does is it sets up some kind of a us them paradigm. But there's there's a reason why people came to Florida in the first place.
Mhm.
And it wasn't because those economic drivers were already here. It's because we had beautiful sandy beaches and, um, you know, some shady areas that looked like really paradise. So if we don't hold on to those, the draw isn't going to be. It's not enough to have you know man-made things here to
Mhm.
draw people. It has to be the complete picture, and that includes, um, I believe that includes educational opportunities, and I mean all the way up and down the line. I think we've talked about this when we talked about um, economic diversification. Really includes being able to provide a workforce, and I think we've got such great academic institutions here, and OCPS is really trying to make sure that there are lots of options for people that are interested in working in trades and getting certifications. But we want to keep them here after that, right? So if some of
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
employers that are a high-end employer if want to come here, that we actually have an inventory of brilliance, that we
Mhm.
we don't just have an inventory of buildings, we have an inventory of brilliant people. So it was part of that kind of holistic discussion of environmental conscientiousness and environmental planning. And so, yeah, I don't think you can separate them. And I think we have to continue to make those links everywhere, because I do think that a lot of the employers get it, right? So I think, and I mean the ones that are even already here, understand that. But I don't necessarily think that it's built into the way that the county does business. So that's where, we have to do the heavy lifting.
Mhm. Let's check and see if we have any questions so far. Do we have any comments? Okay. No. No, that's okay. So with that being said, it was really cool to get a little briefing on some new techniques that it sounds like our public works department is considering on integrating a little bit
Yeah.
more for low impact development. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you learned.
Yeah, so when this is so interesting, because I was actually, it jumped in my head, but I didn't go there in case there was questions when you talked about attracting employers that are interested um, in a beautiful place to live where there are environmental gems that we've treasured. Um, I did get a chance to tour the housing for students that come and do the work study program at Disney, and it's also, I think, an opportunity for some cast members. Beautiful, oh my gosh, so beautiful. And it was one of these that Lee was describing, low impact development. And because we try to put an acronym on everything, you'll see them sometimes
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
LIDs. So an LID is low impact development. The idea behind it is, obviously, whenever you have a footprint for any building, that you need to figure out what's going to happen to water as it comes down and moves off that piece of property. You have to consider what the quality of that water is going to be like once it moves off that property. And the standard way of taking care of it has always been to put those strange man-made, square bodies of water in and around development. Well, for starters, they're really little poison pits. They're little poison pits. They don't do a great job of filtering on their own without some kind of thoughtful planting and dredging on a routine, so which isn't happening. So what the LID provides is an option to that type of stormwater management and really permeability, right? So the idea that the water hits the ground, runs off, and goes into one of those ponds and carries with it whatever toxins are sitting there, right, on the pavement. So these areas that I'm discussing in the Disney housing village, and also in Hamlin, and at the Walmart, and I think at the Publix there, evidently, according to environmental engineers, were ideal to do this type of low impact development because of the way that the soil type was dry enough, that there was a dry enough soil type that with the right type of filtration at the surface level, that they wouldn't have to go into a retention. And the you know what, I'm doing a horrible job of describing
No,
this.
you're doing a great job. No, it's basically utilizing a new technique than just having water go from your parking lot into a, retention area. Now the retention areas are underground, and there's a series of different plants and filtration systems and stones and different layers to help the water filter before it goes
Right,
into
and for my
that.
Windermere friends, you know what I'm talking about, how when the water comes through the regular sandy ground that we have, it operates as a filtration. There are plants that can operate to filter. And so the more of those layers that we add, the better chance we have of recharging our groundwater in a way that will keep us alive longer. So when they started, really looking at ways to keep footprints of commercial development down, putting in those type of stones so that when the water runs through it, there's a level of filtration, and then going from there into basically any kind of capture and filtration is underneath that, and so you're not seeing it. There's not the open receptacle, and ideally there is more filtration inherent in that process, since I guess the other process doesn't really provide any filtration. So I think at the end of the day, we understand that we're going to have to figure out growth. This is appealing, not just because of the lack of poison pools that we have around, but also because it doesn't eat up land. Because anytime that you look at a footprint for a development, and so you're utilizing this much of it for the actual development, but this portion of it over here you have to set aside and remove the trees, change the landscape, do everything on it in order to provide that receptacle of water. Then you're not using that land for that, and that's sort of a win also. I'd love to learn more about it. It was really cool. We got the briefing on the from the environmental engineer that was the consultant on the project, and it sort of opened my eyes to what this low impact development was. I was a little familiar about the way that they had built it, but I wasn't sure what the end goals were and where and how it could be applied or reapplied in backfill projects. So yeah, I think it's going to continue to maybe be something to look at in the way that we grow or allow to grow.
Yeah, I just feel like why not try something new? Just because we've done something in the same way since the 40s, the 50s, as highways were coming in more and more, just paving and cutting virgin forests down for, and completely stripping it of any ecological value, and then putting in these boxy type homes or boxy type stores, and then paving your parking lot.
Right.
You can put permeable surfaces. You can put these different types of bioremediation techniques using trees and plants and stones and layers and different types of soil. All of that is just us mimicking nature and integrating it into where we thrive and survive.
That's right. Because nature, if you give it a fighting chance,
Yeah.
will fix itself. We really need it and its systems, and it really does. Those are our filtration devices. That's our oxygen. So you think about it's people have a hard time putting a dollar value on that, but there is a dollar value, right? Because you can't not have that for life. And I think it was really cool. And maybe we could talk about this more sometime down the road. And maybe even I could have her come on. The HOA president at Hunters Creek gave me some information. Actually, we have it on our coffee table here. That they made a decision as a community to invest in trying to take what they had as their sort of poison receptacles, if you will, their drainage ponds, and mimicking some of the biological systems that would be like how they would be in nature. So they basically tried to create, and they really have done a great job of creating man-made but ecologically viable and friendly water systems there. And so they do flow from one to another, and it's a very interesting investment that I love that they made, because I believe that they understood that there was very little of those left, and especially they're in an area that's very busy with growth, and so putting some money back in to make sure that those ponds, which are in their backyards, they want them to look and smell and feel good, to attract wildlife and to thrive with it, an ecosystem that we can then cohabitate with, because that's what we're going to have to figure out how to do. And so, hearing from them about the birds that they see migrating to the area, and the ability they have to really cohabitate in a safe way with the nature there, because they've taken what was just a poison pond for development and reinvested in it and retooled it to be something of ecological value, was to me a model of what we could really try to work on in so many different communities and areas, and it would just become then a benefit to those communities.
Yeah, I'll just say this is Lee Perry's opinion, not, I'm not representing, everything.
Which means I'm going to agree with it.
But here's what I'm seeing, okay? I'm seeing development taking place in what looks like the cheapest way possible, clear cutting, putting as many units in a tight space, right? I'm seeing people from out of Florida move in some of these areas, and I'm seeing them be offered in maybe a catalog, a certain
they walk through the model home.
They walk through the model home, and they're like, yeah, that you can bike, you can do this, there's all these trees, there's all these bike paths. They move in, and then over time, more and more of that canopy's gone, and more they're realizing that they're kind of living in a situation where they didn't really get what they fully wanted.
And Hunters Creek was developed quite a while ago. And so I think when they realized that, that's when I do think that what brought them to the position of wanting to reinvest in their the ecology of those ponds was exactly what you're saying, that what brought them here was some of that natural beauty, and they realized that they couldn't leave that up to somebody else. That was going to have to be them, because they were part of it's a business. Development's a business, and that's fine. But either we hold them to it now, or we go back and pay later. We just have to decide, and I will continue to hold feet to the fire in the early stages to get those promises kept. I was really frustrated this week in a meeting. Actually, it was an approval process where it looked like potentially there was some misrepresentation about what the residents would get when they moved in, and and it was very specifically related to some habitat loss that they didn't know they were allowed to do. And I don't think the residents there knew that they were. I don't think if you ask the residents, do you think it's worth it to hurt this ecological area, this basically wildlife corridor, for this, would you do it? I think they would have said no, put that somewhere else. But they weren't given that choice. They were basically sold a bill of goods of, this is, here's the way this is going to be laid out. It was probably a beautiful model, a rendering. And so really, for me, it's also a consumer protection issue, because I do think that they're being misled. And I think it's obviously it's, pay now or pay later. I believe that it's really important to make sure that we stop them now, so we're not paying later, because the wetland thing is particularly makes my head want to explode, that we chip away at it. Look, what happened in Houston is going to happen here.
Yeah.
We are giving up our buffers. I don't care if we're not on the ocean. Don't think that that's going to save us, right?
Insurance companies are leaving in flocks
that's not
right now.
Right. So we really have to keep every one of those buffers. And look, I would love the idea for keeping those to come down to just our love of that ecosystem and our love of nature. But even if you're like too narrow to understand that value, understand that you're going to be giving up your property because we're not going to be able to buffer you from the storm.
Yeah,
Right? Like if you can't get that it's really just a really important thing, that
Yeah.
we should value and love nature, right? That it's just really important that we share this planet and this is the only one we've got.
Yeah.
Then understand that your house is going to be underwater if we
Yes.
give up all those wetlands. That is our buffer. There are sponges, there are cleaning devices, and every time I see one coming across my desk at the very end stage of what should have been stopped at the very beginning. See, I'm getting all fired up now. What should have been stopped at the very beginning. It's the very end stage, and I'm going to question it, and I'm going to get probably my, I'm going to get my beating every other Tuesday, but I'm still going to do it. And if you want to tune in and watch me get beat
get
up,
your popcorn.
get your popcorn, understand, I'm going to every single time because we're all going to pay for that.
And but then my last point on this, why I brought this up, was that now all these people have moved in, and I'm just thinking about what's coming across my email. Where are the parks? We can't bike. It's unsafe. We have one of the highest pedestrian fatality rates in the entire country. We were told there would be bike paths where our kids could just bike to school. And when I think about the Hunters Creek example of how when you integrate nature, it makes it more appealing.
Yes.
It makes it more sellable.
That's right.
If developers are cheating nature and not integrating it, they're actually selling themselves short. They're actually making
Well,
less
they don't
of a
care because
profit.
they've packed up and gone by then.
Yeah, they've
Right?
made their
So
profit
this is
and they've
like
left.
this is the oldest. This is the oldest Florida trick in the book, because it's that whole bias piece of swamp. They literally will be packed up and gone. They turn it over to an HOA
Yeah.
that has to clean it up the mess.
Yeah.
And so that in it is very difficult on when there's a project that takes a very long time, and obviously many of these development projects take place over a long period of time.
Years.
For us to be in a position as commissioners, as a commissioner, to check the final box, I'm never just going to do it blindly. I'm going to go back and see what was there, what was in the original plat, and when I do all that, it became really clear to me that very early on, the decisions that are made set the whole thing into motion, and then to stop it becomes its own really big deal, even if it was a bad idea from the onset. And so we talked about this in my office this week. I'm going to continue to really dig in on the history of our development application and the interaction with all of the environmental regulatory bodies, and including, because I don't know why this hasn't come up every single time, the amendment that was passed here in Orange County, that if there's a chance that we are affecting the water body's ability to thrive and flourish, if there's pollution potential, that we should be discussing it, because we would be in violation of our latest CRC amendment that provided a right to clean water. So yeah, that's, I
had to get you fired up right before Saturday. Sorry. Sometimes, sometimes she's a match and I'm the fire, and I just like to set her off.
Yeah, it's and it's all good, right? I gotta keep that. It's funny because I get sort of butterflies in my stomach on Tuesday mornings, and I had this thought, like, gosh, I hope this goes away. I hate that I get this feeling every time I have to make one of these decisions, or I feel like I might be the only one.
No, we want our commissioner to have a soul.
Right.
We want you to.
Right. That's it. Is that I'm like, no, you know what? Actually, if I lose the butterflies, if I really feel like I might be the one asking the tough questions, I need to quit.
Yep.
That's when you get out. So you're right. I got to keep that. I got to keep that. Like, oh, this is making my heart beat a little bit, because I'm getting a little bit fired up about somebody thinking this is okay. And I'll keep doing it. I think we're seeing some mindset changes and some definite reevaluations here. Not all of those are going to be light switches that we can flip in an ordinance change, even though those are going to happen too. But even just hearing some of the discussions that came up made me think, maybe this is starting, maybe the other powers that be are starting to hear the desperation in my voice. No, they're really probably starting to hear, if they're paying attention, the science, and that's what drives me. The science drives me. The heart, you know.
Well, on that note,
Wait, do you have anything fun going on this weekend?
do I have anything fun? Oh, we do have a question.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
We'll go back to weekend chat. We do have a question. We're 5 minutes over,
Oh,
but we're having
sorry.
fun.
I got all.
We're having fun. Go ahead.
Bill Colburn asks, do you have anyone reaching out to the various relatively new ungated HOAs across District 1 and Horizon West to help provide guidance and establish common understanding about county versus HOA responsibility and control when it comes to street trees, retention ponds, street parking, and those communities, etc.?
Excellent question. We have been building a database of contacts. Newsletter has been formulated. It's in its infancy. My absolute goal, you nail on the head, is to make sure that everybody understands not just the interaction and responsibilities of the HOA versus the government, but a lot of times there's also municipality in play. So this week actually had a great opportunity to meet with the leaders of municipalities from around District 1. And so there's always, I think, even if we think we're doing a good job of explaining whose responsibility is whose, there's always an opportunity to continue to educate and to layer those educational components. And I know that HOAs are their own legal creature, and in places where you have a deed restriction or an HOA, when you purchase your property, it should have all been disclosed, and those items should be very, very readily available to the people that live in that neighborhood. That doesn't always happen, and I know that. So we will do everything we can to try to make sure we answer questions if anybody has one to reach out. And then moving forward, maybe we can do an FAQ also about the differences even in a gated versus an ungated community, because they are different in the sort of eyes of the code. And what a deed restricted community is. Maybe I can do a little educational component to put out in a newsletter on what a deed restricted community is and what that means, because there are differences. And so yeah, if you live in a deed restricted or HOA community, in a gated, in a municipality in Orange County, that is a lot of players. It looks very seamless unless you have a problem. So I know what you're saying, and I think I love the idea of really all citizens having all that information available to them, and that being a resource sometimes is also making sure that everybody that's plugged in like you can be a resource also. So yeah, thank you. I love that. We're gonna try to hone in on all those things, because I do
Show them this video. If you have an HOA that you're asking questions to, show them this video.
Well, yeah, or just even or if there's if there's an HOA person out there listening that's like, you know what, I think this would be a good discussion, or even a quick presentation at our HOA meeting, I'd be glad to do that. I would love that, because sometimes we get to the root of problems at the county that maybe were not on the radar, but also it gives an opportunity for us to try to clarify those things, like where does this fall, HOA or county or city. So yeah, I think we need to incorporate as many of those avenues of communication as possible.
Well, to answer your question about my weekend, Commissioner, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be socially distant. I'm going to wear a mask when I go grocery shopping. Woo-hoo! I hope you all do too. And do you have any final thoughts?
No, I just have a great weekend. I think I can't believe we're rounding out February, and it's crazy, isn't it? And I still, even on my hard days, you guys, I'm honored and proud to be here. Even on the days that I don't necessarily look well rested, I still really love my job, and I really feel grateful for being the person who was put here by you. And so, thank you for the continued opportunity and for tuning in. And thank you, Lee, for always sitting here with me on a Friday afternoon.
That's your commissioner right there.
And thank you, Ernest, for being here and helping us. And I love Fridays, and when Ernest comes, I'm like, it's Friday. It's Friday.
Thank you all so much.
You.
Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.